Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Logan never believed in omens or vague intuitions. His world was always based on logic, data, clear patterns that indicated when something was out of place. But this time, it wasn't a malicious code or a system failure that alerted him. It was a void. Not just any silence, but a strange absence he couldn't pinpoint the source of. The conversations between him and Brooke continued to happen, commitments were met, routines more or less stayed the same, and yet, something felt off. It was like an imperceptible noise, the kind of interference you feel more than you hear. This discomfort began to grow during moments that used to go unnoticed. When they went out to dinner, Brooke would have a distant look, as if she were in a parallel environment. When Logan made a joke, she would smile with a delay, but the smile never reached her eyes. It wasn't a lack of love, he told himself. Maybe it was just exhaustion, the routine. Until one day, the explanations he created to calm his own thoughts were no longer enough. What really made him stop and rethink everything was an apparently trivial scene. Brooke got out of the shower and, with a towel on her head, went to the bedroom to grab her phone. It was a simple gesture, but she held the device with an almost mechanical urgency. She didn't unlock the screen right away, nor did she respond to anyone. She just stood there, staring at the blank screen, as if waiting for something that hadn't happened yet or, perhaps, dreading that it might. Logan stood still at the door, watching silently, with the strange feeling that the woman crossing the room was no longer the woman he had married. That was the moment he understood, the problem wasn't what she said or did, but what she avoided showing. There wasn't a specific behavior, a blatant mistake, just the absence of real presence. He started wondering how long it had been since she truly looked him in the eyes, how long the kisses before bed had become mere mechanical rituals, how long the "I love you"s no longer carried more weight than a polite phrase. And, without evidence, without concrete clues, Logan realized the only certainty he needed was that uncomfortable feeling growing inside him like an invisible flaw. A bug that, being so silent, could compromise the entire system if ignored. He knew this was the moment where many choose to close their eyes, avoid confrontation, and keep pretending everything is fine. But that had never been his way. Throughout his career, Logan learned that the most dangerous mistakes are precisely those that seem too small to take seriously. And, at that moment, he decided he wouldn't let this suspicion turn into regret. He didn't want to be caught by surprise, deceived, or find out too late that he had ignored the most important signs of his life. He took a deep breath and, for the first time, looked at Brooke the way he looked at the systems he usually investigated, with coldness, strategy, and the clarity of someone who knows that sometimes the hardest enemy to identify isn't the one who hides well, but the one you love too much to suspect. Without rushing, without confrontations, but with the silent decision that he would find out what was really going on, even if the truth was harder than he was prepared to handle. Logan decided to act with precision. He installed a tracker on Brooke's car, not impulsively, but because he needed to understand what she was doing outside the house so frequently. The next day, when checking the location, he was stunned to see that she was parked at the headquarters of the rival company, a data security firm he knew very well. That was more than strange. She had never mentioned any connection to that company. Logan didn't want to confront her yet. He preferred to observe and understand what she was doing there. That night, he tried to sleep, but the discomfort was unbearable. Around 2 a.m, still awake, he noticed Brooke getting up slowly from the bed, taking great care not to make any noise. He remained still, pretending to sleep, while she left the room and headed to his office. Logan got up shortly after, walked silently, and stopped behind the slightly open door. He saw Brooke sitting in front of his computer, typing quickly and with great focus. She had the password, he had never hidden it from her, but what surprised him was seeing her there, at that hour, alone, accessing his files. She stayed there for almost 20 minutes, then turned off the computer and went back to bed, as if nothing had happened. As soon as it was morning, Logan went to the office and checked the records. Within minutes, he discovered what she had done. Brooke sent confidential files, sensitive customer information, to the rival company. This wasn't just a personal betrayal, it was a crime. Logan froze in front of the screen, trying to understand. Was she trying to frame him? Or was she playing for the rival team, gaining something in return? He knew the owner of that company well, a man without scruples, capable of anything to destroy the competition. He couldn't leave things as they were. Swiftly, Logan changed all the passwords and encryption, blocking access to the files Brooke had sent. Those files were now useless. Then, he took a deep breath and started planning. He couldn't simply accuse her. He needed more. He decided to set a trap to catch Brooke in the act, with all the evidence, leaving no room for denial. Logan knew he needed to go beyond mere surveillance. He knew that for Brooke to fall into his trap, she would need to believe there was still something valuable to extract from him. So, during a casual dinner, he looked into her eyes and, with the calmest expression possible, announced news that, deep down, was pure fabrication. He said he had just closed a contract with one of the largest investment companies in the country, an internationally renowned billion-dollar conglomerate that had decided to hire Logan's security company to manage all their digital infrastructure. He emphasized that the negotiation had been long, but he had finally succeeded in closing the deal. He mentioned that the contract had confidentiality clauses and that the files would be stored on his personal computer, and that he, and only he, would handle everything. Brooke showed a mix of surprise and enthusiasm, but Logan noticed something more in her gaze, a quick glimmer, almost imperceptible, that he knew how to identify very well. It was the look of someone who had just received valuable information. He then reinforced the lie, saying that the amounts involved were extremely high, that this would forever change the stability of the company and ensure financial security for both of them. He repeated several times that the material was highly confidential and that, therefore, he would keep all the data on his own computer to avoid any risk. He also said that, in the coming days, he would spend hours reviewing the documentation and adjusting the systems to meet the requirements of the new client. Brooke listened attentively, asked questions about details, and demonstrated that usual interest of someone who seemed to care about her husband's business. Logan answered patiently, as he always did, but inside, he already knew she wouldn't resist the temptation. That night, exactly as he predicted, Brooke got up again in the middle of the night, with the same silent caution of someone who doesn't want to be noticed. Logan, as on previous occasions, pretended to be asleep, breathing deeply, his body motionless. She left the room, and seconds later, he heard her entering the office. But this time, he had deliberately left the computer disconnected from the internet. He wanted to see how far she would go. Brooke, unaware of the trap, tried to access some files but soon noticed the lack of connection. Then, with the same naturalness that revealed her practice in such actions, she opened the side drawer of the desk and pulled out a USB drive. She connected it to the computer, quickly copied the files she believed were part of the $1 million contract, and, with the same coldness, removed the device and placed it in her bag. Logan, from the other side of the slightly open door, watched the scene with a mix of sadness and relief. That was the definitive confirmation that Brooke didn't hesitate to act against him, even after all the years they had been together. She finished what she was doing, turned off the computer, and went back to bed, lying down beside him as if nothing had happened. The next day, Logan activated another feature he had recently installed, an app that could intercept and mirror her phone messages. He knew this was invasive and, under normal circumstances, he would never do something like that, but the context now exceeded any ethical limits. He needed complete certainty before taking the next step. When he accessed the messages, he saw that Brooke had scheduled a meeting with the owner of the rival company, precisely the following day, at a discreet restaurant in the city. The conversation between the two left no doubt about the nature of the meeting. In addition to arranging the exact moment for the delivery of the USB drive, there was also an exchange of clearly intimate messages. Logan read, with fixed eyes, the sequence in which she said she missed him and could hardly wait to see him. And he responded with the same intimacy. That made Logan realize, with brutal clarity, that his wife was betraying him not only in business but also in love. It wasn't just corporate espionage but a complete betrayal, a facade built within his own home, with a man who, in addition to being a professional rival, was now also a personal rival. Even so, he kept his cool. He knew acting on impulse wouldn't solve anything. He needed to ensure that, when he acted, he would have the protection of the law and the necessary strength to end everything at once. He contacted an officer from the police specialized in corporate and cyber crimes. He explained the entire situation, presented the complete dossier he had been assembling for weeks, digital traces, messages, recordings, documents, solid evidence that Brooke and the owner of the rival company were involved in an industrial espionage scheme. The officer confirmed that the case fit various crimes outlined in the legislation: violation of trade secrets, intellectual property crime, qualified theft through fraud, and criminal association, as provided for in the Penal Code. The guidance was clear: stay calm and let the police participate in the arrest, so everything could be conducted within legal limits and with all procedural guarantees. On the night of the meeting, Logan discreetly followed Brooke to the restaurant. He observed from a distance as she entered the place, sat at a table with the owner of the rival company, and, shortly after, greeted him with a kiss on the lips. The scene was quick but sufficient to confirm everything Logan needed to know. They behaved like a couple. They laughed, exchanged complicit looks, and at one point, Brooke opened her bag and took out the USB drive, placing it on the table. At that moment, Logan approached, accompanied by the officer and two specialized agents. As soon as Brooke noticed their approach, she tried to hide the USB drive, but it was too late. The officer presented the arrest warrant, explaining that they were being detained on charges of industrial espionage, intellectual property violation, and criminal association. Both Brooke and the owner of the rival company were momentarily paralyzed by the shock of being caught red-handed. The man tried to argue, but the evidence was irrefutable. Within minutes, the two were handcuffed and taken into custody. Logan stood still, watching the scene with a void difficult to describe. There was no relief, no joy. Just the realization that it was all over, in the hardest and most definitive way possible. Logan stood there for a few seconds, watching as the two were taken away by the police. The restaurant, which until moments before had been the stage for a silent betrayal, was now the setting for a public and indisputable conclusion. He took a deep breath. There was nothing more to say or do at that moment. He picked up the USB drive the officers had seized and handed it over as definitive proof. He went home without looking back, his mind heavy but with the awareness that he had protected not only himself but also his company and the clients who trusted him. In the days that followed, news of the scandal spread through the cybersecurity sector like an uncontrollable wildfire. The arrest of Brooke and the owner of the rival company made headlines on specialized sites and business forums. Many wondered how Logan had the necessary composure to dismantle the scheme without alerting anyone before the right moment. But those who knew his background knew he always operated this way: meticulous planning, precise execution. Still, behind this image of an unshakable man, there was someone who had just witnessed his marriage and part of his personal life disintegrate before his own eyes. It was in this atmosphere of chaos and exposure that Logan made an important decision. He called Cole Turner, an old friend and colleague from his days working at the NSA, someone he trusted completely, and proposed the creation of a new company. He said he no longer wanted to work under the shadow of what had happened, that he needed a fresh start, a project with solid principles and values, far from the vulnerabilities his personal life had revealed. Cole accepted immediately, and together they founded Brennan and Turner, a company specializing in cybersecurity and private operations. The new company started discreetly, with few contracts, but Logan's reputation and Cole's credibility soon attracted important clients. Within months, they were advising major corporations, protecting critical systems, preventing other companies from becoming victims of fraud or espionage like the one Logan had just faced in his own life. Each new contract signed was confirmation that he had transformed the greatest betrayal he could suffer into an opportunity for growth and overcoming. Logan immersed himself in work, reorganized his routine, built new processes, and, for the first time in months, began to feel a certain sense of peace. But even so, a part of him believed that, after everything he had been through, it would be difficult to trust someone again, whether in personal or professional matters. That impression began to change one unassuming night when Harper, a colleague from the team, invited him to dinner. He almost declined, but ended up accepting, without high expectations. They sat at a quiet restaurant, talked about projects, exchanged ideas about improving the company, and gradually, the conversation drifted away from the professional environment. Harper didn't ask intrusive questions about what had happened, she simply listened, with respect and genuine interest. Logan realized he didn't need to explain or justify anything to her, and this surprised him. For the first time, he felt comfortable talking about the betrayal without anger or shame, just as someone who had lived through something difficult and overcome it. The dinner was light, unpretentious, and he returned home without the feeling of emptiness that had accompanied him for months. He realized he was starting over, even without having planned it. He didn't need to fill the space Brooke had left, he just needed to allow, little by little, for other people to approach without fear or distrust. In the following months, Harper became not only a reliable partner at the company but also someone who, quietly, was occupying an increasingly important place in Logan's personal life. They built their relationship naturally, without rush, without the need to prove anything to the world or to themselves. And it was only then, a long time after that dinner, that Logan understood the true victory of this story. It wasn't the perfect catch, nor the success of the new company, nor the imprisonment of the traitors. The real victory was the ability to move forward, to rebuild with dignity, to allow love and trust to be reborn, even after having been so violently destroyed. There, beside Harper, in a life rebuilt with effort and truth, Logan understood that some betrayals don't destroy, they just show that it was necessary to make room for something infinitely better. A few weeks later, Logan received an unexpected call. It was Brooke's lawyer. The voice, formal and direct, informed him that she wanted to see him, that she wished to have a final conversation before the last hearing. Logan remained silent for a few seconds, pondering whether or not he should accept. He didn't need this, didn't need to hear excuses, but deep down, he knew this conversation would be the final point he needed to close that chapter once and for all. The next morning, he went to the detention center where Brooke was being held. The environment was cold and impersonal, like every place where wrong choices eventually lead people. He was escorted by an officer to the reserved visiting room. When he entered, he saw Brooke sitting at the table, wearing the prison uniform, her eyes downcast, her expression worn, very different from the woman he had known and shared so many years of life with. She looked up when she saw him, and before he could say anything, she began speaking, her voice trembling and filled with remorse. She said she didn't know what she was doing, that she had been deceived, that she believed Carter's promises, that he had promised her a new life, success, freedom, and that, in the end, she realized she was just another pawn in his game. She said she felt ashamed, that she never wanted to hurt Logan that way, and that, looking back now, she couldn't understand how she found the courage to cross so many boundaries. She apologized sincerely, with tears in her eyes, and said she knew she would probably never be forgiven, but that she needed to say all of this. Logan listened in silence, with the same calm and steady gaze he had maintained from the beginning. When she finished, he took a deep breath and, without changing his tone of voice, said that he had never wished to see her behind bars, that he never wanted this fate for her, but that it was her own choices, each lie, each betrayal, that had put her in that situation. He said that, despite everything, he hoped she would find a way to rebuild herself, to understand what she had done, and perhaps one day find some peace. She tried to hold his hand, but he gently pulled away, looked at her one last time in the eyes, and calmly wished her, good luck. He stood up, turned his back, and walked toward the exit, without looking back, certain that this conversation was, definitively, the final point. As he crossed the door, he felt that, for the first time since everything began, he was truly free. Suspicious of your wife or daughter-in-law? Don't go through what we saw in the video. Check the link in the comments and get the ebook with valuable tips and investigator-approved sites to clear your doubts. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.